Dear devotees, thank you for joining our Sunday feast. Welcome you all to Iskcon Naperville. As you all know that we are doing one chapter a week summary of all entire Bhagavad Gita, 18 chapters. So this is our second week. So our Prabhu Yamuna Jivan Prabhu is going to give an overview of Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 today. And intro about Prabhu. Prabhu was first introduced to Vedic philosophical teachings and the Bhagavad Gita in his youth in Nigeria, and then later in Spain. In addition to his day job as a senior manager of engineers at Aprilia, he is an experienced spiritual educator, and he has spent at least minimum 15 years of serving in leadership role in St. Louis and Chicago temples, as well as reaching out to college students to share ancient practices of Bhakti Yoga. As a trained meditator and a chaplain, he also volunteered his time to provide pastoral care to the broader Iskcon community in life crisis and grief counseling. He lives with his wife and 2 boys just north of city of Chicago. So Prabhu, great profile, and I know personally your spiritual practices. It's amazing, and previous classes I heard from you are very enlivening and spiritually uplifting. So I am looking forward to hear from you and everybody on the call and also on the Zoom Naperville community to hear from you on Bhagavad Gita chapter 2. With that, Prabhu, please, if you have any presentation, please go ahead and share the screen. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Panduranga Gopal Prabhu. Thank you so much for a very undeserving introduction, especially the part that you were sharing from your just personal experience. I feel very fortunate to be part of the group today and to be able to share from Bhagavad Gita, primarily because I feel very connected to the Bhagavad Gita as a text. It has been something that has given me guidance and inspiration in my life since I was 15 years old. And so I feel very fortunate to be able to speak about chapter 2, especially because it's such a powerful chapter. So thanks again for the devotees who invited me to be able to speak, and I hope to have sufficient interaction. I'd like to hear some maybe key points towards the end of the talk. I'll request you to share some key points from chapter 2 that have particularly inspired some of the devotees on the call here, because I see based on the list here, the number of devotees here are practicing and probably have studied the second chapter of the Gita multiple times. All right, with that, I'll begin with the Invocation Prayers, which help to sort of level set the spiritual atmosphere with which one is meant to speak and hear divine texts of yoga tradition. So I'll begin that. This actually is in the introduction of the Gita. So those of you who might be new, in the introduction of the Gita, there's something called the Mangalacharan. And the Mangalacharan describes or shares a number of verses that help to inspire our heart as we approach mysteries of life through sacred texts. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadhamayam Dadate Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishavanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. It is the second largest chapter in the Gita with 72 verses, right after chapter 18, which is the last chapter of the Gita, that has 78 verses. So chapter 2 is, as you can imagine, thick and rich with multiple messages. There's so much in this chapter. I considered whether to create some kind of content in terms of PowerPoint or something like that. However, to be honest with you, it felt a little overwhelming of how much information there is in the chapter 2 that I felt I wouldn't be able to do justice to capture all of that in some kind of electronic format. In any case, I will just share some thoughts as we go along. Areas of chapter 2 that are particularly emphasized by some of our great teachers, and we'll see how that goes. So chapter 2 is primarily divided into two sections. While the chapter itself, according to many teachers, is titled as Sankhya Yoga. So the chapter 1 was titled Arjuna Vishada Yoga, or just Vishada Yoga. Vishada Yoga means the yoga of dejection or the yoga of lamentation, because Arjuna is in a very precarious position where he's confronted with having to fight his family. It's a little overwhelming. And so this chapter 2 is titled Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya means being able to count. Sankhya literally means being able to count, but it really means, Sankhya means putting the world on pause. I don't know if some of you watched The Matrix, the movie, but in the Matrix movie, sometimes the entire scene, the world that we live in, is put on pause, and the protagonist, Neo, or Keanu Reeves, the actor, and he's trying to analyze, understand what's the world about. So that's what Sankhya Yoga is. You put the world on pause and you deeply contemplate and understand what is it that makes up this world? What are the various elements that comprise the world we live in? What is matter? What is spirit? What are the various facets of matter, etc., etc.? What are the subtle elements that we cannot even see or perceive with these common senses? So that's Sankhya Yoga. However, Sankhya Yoga only goes up to text 39 of this chapter. The rest of the chapter, all the way up to 72, Krishna switches and starts talking about Buddhi Yoga. So chapter 2 is really a composition of first Sankhya and then Buddhi Yoga. The way I like to think about it is the first half is about putting the world on pause and trying to understand it. And the second half is about when you hit the play button, and now how should one live one's life? That's Buddhi Yoga. Now, in the previous chapter, Arjuna is experiencing a lot of grief. That's how the chapter ends, chapter 1. And then chapter 2, we hear in the very first verse, Arjuna is crying. He's very disturbed. And he's already given some really good reasons to Krishna that why he doesn't want to fight. What we find in this world is that if someone is going through a very tough time, like Arjuna is going through a very tough time, perhaps a confusing time, perhaps a time when things don't make sense. In fact, Arjuna says in text 8 of this chapter 2, he says, even if I were to win this battle and become the sovereign king of the entire kingdom, I know that my heart is going to be hurting with pain and grief. I know I can't be happy, even if I were to win. So he's in such a state of mind that is very confusing. And such moments in our life can be birthing opportunities for tremendous spiritual growth. And that's what chapter 2 represents. It's this point where Arjuna is at a breaking point in his life, and fortunately he has Krishna to help him, to guide him through it, and it becomes a powerful spiritual experience overall, even though they're in the midst of a battle. Which is another life lesson to take from this, is that it doesn't matter how busy you are. Arjuna had to fight a war, but then he was stopped by Krishna to be spoken to about the Bhagavad Gita for an hour and a half. Sometimes we might get caught up with, I'm too busy to read or access Gita. Of course, being a Sunday evening, it's a little easier to offer some energy and attention and time to the Gita. But to do that when we're busy during the week, let's say, when we got to go to work and things like that, we learn from the Gita, the very first lesson is, it doesn't matter how busy you are. Stopping to listen to these messages and bathing our consciousness in these messages is essential to be able to enter into life with a wholesome heart and a straight head and with proper conception. So, in the very beginning of this second chapter, we see in text 5, 6, Arjuna explains totally Arjuna has 5 reasons where he tells Krishna why he doesn't want to fight. In this chapter, in chapter 2, there's 2 reasons that are highlighted. Number 1, Arjuna says, I don't want to fight because these are my teachers. Dronacharya has given me so much through military training. And Bhishma, he's my grandfather. He took care of us. How can I fight these people? So out of gratitude to these individuals, Arjuna did not want to fight. The other reason is that he felt like he was undecided to fight. You know, there are some benefits to fighting and there's some downsides, there's some cons to fighting. So that indecision itself was enough of a deterrent to move ahead and fight. He had some excellent reasons in chapter 1, which I'm sure you heard about last week, is how can I perform this sinful activity of killing? How will I be happy if I don't have my family members to enjoy the kingdom with? And just general compassion for other fellow human beings, right? So he had some very good reasons. He kept his family as a higher priority in his life. One would look at Arjuna's reasons and say, fantastic, you're a good person. All of these are great reasons. Yes, don't fight. What we see Krishna does in the very beginning of the chapter 2, he says, Klebyam masmakam apartha. Where is this impotence come over you, Arjuna? The beginning of the chapter itself is chastisement. Krishna listened to Arjuna all the way through the end of chapter 1. He didn't say a word. And here in the beginning of chapter 2, Krishna lays it on him with a little bit of a sting of chastisement. Calling him impotent for a Kshatriya, that's a little insulting. It's a little jarring. God, Krishna, is shaking Arjuna out of his common mindset of what is good. In the world that we live in, it is so prevalent, right? Like if we're working in a company, generally as you're heading into the holiday season, which we just got over, at a company, they will say, okay, now's the time to Christmas time, take time off, make sure you enjoy with your family and friends. That's a very common idea. It's considered to be good, it's considered to be wholesome, it's considered to be beneficial, it's considered to be laudable if you work hard for your family, if you spend time with your family and friends, if you take care of your family and those kind of things. It's just one of the highest ideals and deeply held values that people have. And what we see in the very beginning of the Gita here, that Krishna is smashing and challenging actually that deeply held value. Now Krishna is trying to prod Arjuna to think a little deeper, to think more on the platform of the spirit. Go beyond the body, go beyond your family, go beyond your mundane way of thinking of good, and actually understand what is good. So this prodding and this challenging is coming from Krishna. Part of the reason he can do that, Krishna can do that, is because Arjuna trusts Krishna. And we see this in text 7, where Arjuna finally recognizes, I can't figure this out on my own. And then he says a very beautiful verse, text 7 in chapter 2. It's kind of like a pivotal verse. So far, Arjuna and Krishna were interacting as friends. Then Arjuna finally says, Karpanya dosho pahat svabhava prachami tvam dharma samudacheta yashreyasya nishchitam bruhitan me shishyaste ham shadimam tvam prapannam. Beautiful verse where Arjuna says, my heart is become miserly. My heart has become tight and closed. I do not know. I've become confused. I do not know what I should be doing. Now, please, can you tell me? Yashreyasyan. Please tell me what is my long-term benefit? What is best for me? Right? He's looking to Krishna. He says, Shishyaste, I am a disciple surrendered unto you. I trust you, and I know you will guide me well. Shishyaste ham shadimam tvam prapannam. I'm surrendering unto you. So Arjuna is fortunate in this time of his life where he has a problem, where he has this immense confusion. He has someone he can go to because he trusts Krishna. It's not just that God was there. It is the fact that Arjuna trusts Krishna. That was Arjuna's wealth. Because Duryodhana was there, he was going through trouble. So many other people were there, but it was Arjuna who surrendered to Krishna, and therefore Arjuna was the one who was most benefited by this exchange in the whole Bhagavad Gita. So in this section, text 7, text 8 of chapter 2, the qualities of a disciple, as we see the humility of Arjuna, the surrender of Arjuna, the inquiry of Arjuna are being described. And then in text 8, the qualities of the spiritual master and the purport is discussed. Prabhupada explains what are the qualities of the spiritual master, such as Krishna, who is acting as a spiritual master or guru for Arjuna. Krishna smiles upon hearing Arjuna's surrender and Arjuna's request to shift the relationship a little bit and no longer be as friends, but now be more of senior guru and junior disciple. Krishna smiles. It's always interesting. Why does Krishna smile in different parts of the Vedic scriptures? And the Acharya say is how Krishna's amused at how Arjuna has shifted his mood towards him. The very first words Krishna speaks in text 11, Ashochan anvashochastvam pragyavadam shabashase. You're speaking like a great person. You're speaking like a wise person, giving all of these mundane, moral, ethical reasons. But my dear Arjuna, wise people do not lament like you are lamenting. He doesn't judge Arjuna for lamenting, but rather he's helping Arjuna, he's inspiring Arjuna to go past his limitations due to material conceptions. So then, from then on, text 12, all the way up to text 38, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna about the signs of the soul. And he's explaining this very powerful concept. And I say powerful because I can share with you that there's some things in life that we question in very strong ways, such as intense evil. You know, there's many situations of not just current times, but of previous times, like the Holocaust, or, you know, where you have genocide, where you have people being hurt and just treated unfairly and badly, or you might have mass murders that happen in schools. And some of these things just play with our minds in very strong ways. We don't understand it. Why? How is it that such unfair things can happen in this world? You know? And this concept of the spiritual being separate from the body is powerful in that it's the entryway to be able to reconcile some of the intense evil that happens in this world for us. So Krishna explains, Natvevaham jatu nasam, in text 12. He says there's never a time when you did not exist, when I did not exist, when any of these kings did not exist, and never will there be a time they will not exist. And then the very famous verse, Deno asmin yata dehe kamaram Yovanam Jara, where just as a soul, just as your body changes from boyhood to youth to old age, similarly the soul doesn't change, it's still within the same body. Similarly, when the old body is dead, then the soul moves on to the next body. A very logical explanation of how transmigration happens. So then Krishna says, if you understand this concept of the living entity being separate from the body, or being different than the body and only temporarily resides in the body, he says, if you understand that, matra sparshastu kaunteya, you're able to tolerate happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor, and various other painful and maybe joyous dualities of the world. And then Krishna goes on to explain this over and over and over and over again, because by repetition, and Prabhupada explains in one of the purport, by repetition, that's how we can actually understand these things. So Krishna repeats the similar message to Arjuna. You should not be lamenting. You don't deserve to lament, because the living entity is different than the body. Your family members are not really your family members. And besides, even if they were to die, they don't really die. Just as Krishna uses beautiful analogies, just like you might have a shirt that's old and you remove the shirt and you put on a new shirt. Similarly, the body is one that you might give up and then take on a new body. But Krishna is a very thorough, I should say, teacher. Because even when Krishna explains this science of the soul, then Krishna takes the other, Purva Paksha is known, he takes the other side and says, okay, if you were to believe that you are the body and not a spiritual being in the body, fine. Even then, you should not be lamenting. Even then, Krishna says, because if your body and you as a person are simply a combination of material elements that have come into being now, fine. But then what is there to worry about or lament about? Because those same elements will come together by the power of time, and those same elements will disintegrate. It's just natural. Time brings you into being, and time will take you out of being. So why lament? So Arjuna, then Krishna goes on to explain to Arjuna, all right, let's step down from the spiritual platform. Let's not talk about matter and spirit. Let's just talk about you as a Kshatriya and your duty as a warrior. And then Krishna goes to explain to him from that standpoint. If you are a warrior, then your duty is to fight. Your duty is to protect. And if you don't protect, you will actually incur sin. The very same reason that Arjuna said he didn't want to fight is because of sinful reaction. Krishna's giving him a trump card and saying, no, that's not going to work, because if you do not fight, you will actually incur sin. If you do not perform your duty, that is what will make you incur sin. And for great warriors, the opportunity to fight is actually what's going to help you get to a higher place or a more enjoyable place in your next life. So these are all the various reasons Krishna gives him, all the way up to text 38, where Krishna tells him, therefore, without thinking about whether you're going to win or not win, without thinking about your own happiness or no happiness, fight. Do your duty. So then Krishna at text 39, halfway through the chapter, he says, all right, I've explained to you Sankhya Yoga. Now I'm going to switch up and I'm going to start talking to you about Buddhi Yoga. Because you've understood, or at least he's tried to explain to Arjuna, what's the difference between the soul and the mind and the body. The mind and the body are temporary and the soul is eternal. And that soul is who you really are. Krishna is saying, now that you've understood that, now let me explain to you Buddhi Yoga. Krishna begins the teachings of Buddhi Yoga by explaining that if you engage in Buddhi Yoga, if you actually practice Buddhi Yoga, that this benefit of Buddhi Yoga is everlasting. You get a spiritual bank account. Something that we may invest in a material bank account, when we die, is gone. Right? We can't take that bank account with us. Krishna says, Neha Vikramana Shosti Pratyavaya Navidyate Swalpam Pyasya Dharmasya Tarayate Mahato Vayat. That Swalpamasya Alpam. Alpam means very little. Su Alpam. That's Swalpam. Su Alpam, meaning if you do very little activity in this Buddhi Yoga realm, Trayate Mahato Bhayat, that you are freed, you are saved from the greatest danger. And what is the greatest danger? The greatest danger is in our next life. Where are we going? I don't know how many of you may have contemplated this, but something I've done a number of times is to just observe insects. And, like a lizard or a spider or some of those really funky insects that come out in the summertime. When you look at these insects and the kind of lives they live, it's not really laudable. It's not a fun life. But we're told that, we might have been one of these in our previous lives. We might have been a lizard in our previous, we might have been a cockroach. And who knows what our next life is going to be. Sometimes I worry about this because in my next life, I don't know how I'm doing in this life, but probably not very well. So, but here Krishna gives us a little reassurance. He says, Trayate Mahato Bhayat, by performing a little bit of Bhakti Yoga, a little bit of Buddhi Yoga, that you will at least have a human birth in your next life. You may not go back to Godhead because you may not have been accomplished in spiritual life, but minimally in your next life, you will become a human being, which I think is nice and reassuring. So that's the very beginning of the Buddhi Yoga teaching that Krishna gives. And then Krishna in the text 41 to 44, he explains the concept of single-mindedness or vyavasayatmika buddhi. Vyavasayatmika means undeviating. Buddhi means intelligence, right? I was hearing a very beautiful explanation of the 5 states of our minds. Our mind has 5 states. Okay, the first state or the lowest state is called vikshepa, where it's very distracted. The next state is where it is controlled by dullness or ignorance, where it's attracted to being dull, maybe sleep and those kind of things. The third state is where your mind is focused, but is focused for passionate purposes, rajasic purposes, like, you might get absorbed in a video game, or you might get absorbed at work, like that, where your mind is now focused, but is focused for a passionate reason or a rajasic reason. Watching a movie is also a reason for, a rajasic reason for why the mind might get focused. So these first three, distraction, which we're all very familiar with our phones and surfing the internet, and zero moment of truth is a technical term, as we want to know information like this immediately. With our phones, we can get any information so fast by either saying, Alexa, or Hey Google, or Siri, give me this information. We get distracted so easily to get information. Then controlled by dullness or focus, the mind is focused on being dull. The mind is focused on some rajasic principle. The fourth level is where the mind is focused on being present and being peaceful and being happy with just being insignificant. That's the Nishtha stage. That's a established sattva state, mode of goodness state. That is prior to the fifth stage, which is transcendental absorption or samadhi. So this vyavasayatmika buddhi that Krishna explains in text 41 through 44 is describing these levels 4 and 5, where one's mind is not absorbed in unbeneficial things, it's absorbed in humility and in satisfaction with whatever we have, and it's progressing towards ultimate absorption in Krishna himself. This verse, text 41, which goes like this, Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kuru nandana bhaushakanantascha buddhayo vyavasayanam. This verse is very meaningful for us, those of us who are followers of Srila Prabhupada, or we are inspired and we gain deep wisdom and appreciation of Vedic texts from Srila Prabhupada. He was, as we've heard, his life has been amazing. What he was able to accomplish was unprecedented and is still unprecedented. What catapulted Srila Prabhupada to come to the West, despite having no money, despite having no friends or support or any of that, was this verse. Prabhupada read this verse, Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kuru nandana bhaushaka nantascha buddhayo vyavasayanam. And he read this commentary of an acharya called Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary on this verse, he describes that the way this manifests is this, ekagrena, this vyavasayatmika buddhi, where this mind is focused. The way it's focused is on the instructions of the spiritual master, where the devotee doesn't care whether he's going to be successful or he's going to be a failure, whether it's good for him or not good for him, whether he's going to be happy by it, but rather he wants to serve his spiritual master, and that's it. He doesn't care about his own liberation. He doesn't care about his own perfection, etc. He simply wants to please the spiritual master. And so Prabhupada read that explanation by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur on this verse, and it just gave him this, power, rocket fuel in his heart to, okay, that's it. I'm headed to America. Despite all odds, he was able to do that. It's because of this verse. So I'd encourage the devotees to carefully read 241 multiple times in your life, because it has given me inspiration, and I'm sure it might also give you inspiration. And that focused mind is founded upon, in the Purport Prabhupada explains, Shraddha Shabde Vishwasa ka hai, Sudridhan Nishchaya. That when there's faith, then one can have such a focused and determined mood in life. And what breaks that determination? In text 44, Krishna says, Bhogeshwarya prasaktanam taya parata chetasam. So when people are too much self-interested or interested in enjoyment, or they're interested in making it big, they want to grow in their social status, they want to grow in a career in perhaps a not so wholesome way, these kind of things, samadhauna vidhiyate. For them, they cannot become focused, unfortunately. Because from one thing to the next, we want to enjoy this, then we want to enjoy that, we want to enjoy the next thing, because everything we touch, we try to enjoy, we try to squeeze enjoyment from. After some time, there's no more juice. And then we try to enjoy something else. It's just the way of material life. So moving on to text 47, probably one of the very, very famous verses in the Gita as a whole, but certainly in chapter 2, where Krishna says, Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala heturbhur ma te sangosu karmani. In this verse, I have a colleague, and many people know this verse. Even people who are not part of the bhakti movement, they know this verse. I have a colleague, and they're actually my boss, who knows this verse, okay? And he'll quote it for me. And he says that I just follow this. Karmanyevadhikaraste, I just do my duty. The problem is that many people don't think about the other 3 lines of the verse. Because Krishna doesn't say, just do your duty. Krishna says, Karmanyevadhikaraste, ma phaleshu kadachana. There's 3 ma's. Ma in Sanskrit means no. So Krishna says, don't think yourself the creator of the result of your work. Ma karma phala heturbo, ma te sangostva karmani. And don't be attached to not doing your work. Right? So, sorry, I missed the second line. Karmanyevadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Yeah, don't think yourself the cause of the result of your work. Don't think yourself that you are the one who's doing the work. That's what Krishna says. So in that verse, he's bringing Arjuna to the spiritual platform, but most people who understand this verse don't understand the other 3 lines. They only know Karmanyevadhikaraste. They think that's all the Bhagavad Gita is. Just do your duty and serve your family, and that's it. There's a big no. It's a big misunderstanding. So next, Krishna explains the concept of yoga. In text 48, 49, 50, Krishna explains the idea of yoga. What is yoga? Samatvam yoga uchate. The idea of being equipoised, or your mind is peaceful in happiness and distress. Your mind is not attached to success or failure. Right? That's the yoga principle. And Krishna says, he uses a very important word. He says in text 50, yoga karmasu kaushalam, that it's an art. Just like art is very delicate, very refined, similarly, the path of yoga, where you're working in this world, yet you're detached from this world, just like a duck. A duck is swimming in a pond, yet the duck doesn't get wet. Right? Similarly, a person who is performing yoga, Krishna says, and he's encouraging Arjuna, you also fight in this way, where you're fighting, but you're not absorbed, or you're not attracted to the benefits or the challenges of doing your duty of fighting. That, Krishna says, is yoga. Much unlike what most people in this world consider to be yoga. Okay, so I'm aware of the time, so I'm going to sort of try to summarize the last section swiftly. Text 54. Arjuna then asks a very poignant question to Krishna. So keep in mind, Arjuna spoke last in text 7 and 8, where he tells Krishna, I'm a soul surrendered to you. I'm confused. Please tell me what's best for me. So since text 8, Arjuna hasn't spoken, all the way to text 54, Krishna has given him a big lecture. He's given him a Sankhya Yoga lecture and a Buddhi Yoga lecture. Now Arjuna starts to ask his first question, where he says, Krishna, how can I know who is this person whose sthita pragya, whose mind is fixed, whose consciousness is well established? He asks, what is his language? How does he speak? How does he walk? And how does he sit? Each of these questions seems very interesting, right? Is Arjuna asking, does he have a gait when he walks? How does he speak? Does he have a nice accent when he speaks? That's not what Arjuna is asking. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that these questions are deep. What language, meaning what is he interested in? What is his interest in? That's his language. How does he speak? Means how does he respond to circumstances of life that may be either very exciting or very troublesome? That's how does he speak. How does he walk? Meaning, what does he engage in? What kind of things he wants to engage his senses in? And then how does he sit? Meaning, what things does he stay away from doing? That's how does he sit? What does he avoid in his life? So each of these questions are answered by Krishna from text 55 all the way to text 72, which ends the chapter. I will bring up text 56. For my wife and I, this is one of our favorite verses in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, Dukeshu anudvignamana sukeshu vigatspriha vitaragavaya krodha stitadir muniruchyate. So text 56 explains that Dukeshu anudvignamana, that when a person, so 56 and 57 explain this question, how does a person who's sthita pragya, whose consciousness is fixed, how do they speak? Yeah, meaning how do they respond to situations of life that are either exciting or troublesome, like I was saying. So in text 56 and 57, we understand the qualities of a person. It's of a person of such consciousness. It is also an answer for how do you know someone is humble? Text 56. Dukeshu anudvignamana. That their mind in times of painful circumstance, it doesn't waver, it doesn't become disturbed. Sukheshu vigatspraha, even in times of excitement, it is not prompted by disturbance. In other words, sometimes when we win a lottery, we might become really excited and, oh wow, I won the lottery and all that. For Sthita Dhir Muni, they see positive experience in this world as simply part of life, as simply the passage of time. They don't get super attracted to it. They don't get super excited about it. Sukheshu vigatspriha. Vita raga bhaya krodha. They're free from attachment and therefore fear and therefore anger. In such a person, Krishna says, this is how he speaks. In text 57, he says, Nabhinandati na dveshti, that they do not praise great circumstances. Oh wow, I've been promoted at work, or I've been able to buy a new Tesla. Nabhinandati na dveshti. They don't express words of hatred. I was talking to my kid earlier today. He says, I hate this and I hate that. I was like, whoa, that's a very strong word. So for the spiritual minded person, they don't hate things. Tato na vijugupsate. We learn in Ishopanishad that spiritual persons don't have this hatred in their heart, either towards people or towards circumstances or towards their laptop that just busted or something like that. Nabi nandati na dveshti. That's how they speak. They don't speak in extremes. They have balanced minds. All right. I am aware of the time, so I'm going to very swiftly explain that how does he sit? Well, Krishna says he sits like a tortoise. He sits like a turtle. Like a turtle withdraws their limbs into their shell. Similarly, as a great sage, a man of self-realization, he doesn't engage his senses in enjoyment activities. He engages only in service. There are many other verses in text, like text 60, text 61. And there's beautiful, beautiful verses that describe this path of Buddha Yoga very wonderfully. I'll just explain text 61. It's the only verse in chapter 2 where Krishna gives a little hint, a little drop of the concept of bhakti. In text 61, Krishna says that the person who's engaging in Buddha Yoga, their internal consciousness is Tani Sarvani Samyamya. They don't engage, they've got their senses fully in control. Yukta Asita Matpara. They engaged in serving me, Matpara. They use their eyes, their nose, their ears, their hands, their legs, all of their senses, Matpara, surrender to me. And these are the people who engage in true Bhakti Yoga or Buddha Yoga. So that's in text 61. It's the only place where Krishna indicates himself. Everywhere else in chapter 2, Krishna is quite Upanishadic kind of talk. He gives very basic kind of understandings. But the sweetness of the Bhakti principle is just hinted at in text 61. And then towards the end of the chapter, Krishna explains how one can become free from, or one can become peaceful, and then ultimately how can one go back to Godhead by the means of becoming free from desire. Just like rivers are splashing into the ocean, yet the ocean is peaceful and calm. Similarly, a man of self-realization or Buddha Yoga, a lot of desires may come into their mind, but they do not become disturbed. And without a sense of proprietorship, without any sense of false ego, such a person maintaining such a mood in their life, if they keep that attitude, if they keep that consciousness up to the end of their life, Krishna says, Brahma Nirvanam, they go back home, back to Godhead. So that's how Krishna ends chapter 2. Experiencing true peace and then maintaining that true peace with a refined consciousness, the end of one's life, and then one enters into the spiritual kingdom. And then he closes chapter 2, and then chapter 3 begins with Arjuna asking a question. All right, so I've said a lot. I've gone 7 minutes over what I wanted to go over. I'll open up to any questions or comments or your own reflections or some areas of chapter 2 you'd like to share with the group that have been particularly meaningful for you. Please, I humbly request you to please offer your thoughts.
Thank you, Prabhu, for your wonderful discourse. We would like devotees to unmute themselves and ask any question so that Prabhu can address. Give it a second.
Hare Krishna,
General,
Prabhuji.
yeah. Go ahead, Mataji.
I'm sorry. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. While you were, you said about Sankhya Yoga, and you said it comes to a complete halt. That's what terminology I think used. So why did you say that, Prabhuji? Can you please explain me?
Sure. What I intended to say was that Sankhya Yoga is the analytical study of the world we live in.
Yeah.
And if you want to analyze something, just like if you want to analyze, let's say a rat. In biology they do that, right? You can have a live rat running around under the microscope, right? You can.
Oh.
So when you want to understand Sankhya Yoga, you have to. What they do, unfortunately, they kill the rat and then they kind of look at the cells of the rat and so forth, right? The rat is dead. So similarly, it's probably a terrible example, but hopefully you get the point. You have to put the world in pause and first analyze. Sankhya Yoga is analyzing what are all the elements that make up this world. That's what I intended to say. You put the world on pause, things are not moving, you're just trying to understand what makes up this world before you understand what are the interactions of things in this world.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like,
The
and
rat
Sankhya
example
Yoga
was perfect.
Sankhya Yoga explains, okay, there are 5 gross elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether. Then there's 5 knowledge acquiring senses: eyes, nose, ears, tongue, and touch, right? And then there's 5 working senses: arms, legs, speech, and so forth, genitals and anus. So these are. So, and then there's the subtle elements. There's the mind, the intelligence, there's the false ego. So you put everything on pause and you're understanding, okay, what are the gross elements, what are the subtle elements, and then finally there's a soul. That analytical study is Sankhya Yoga.
Sankhya. Okay. Sure.
That makes sense?
Yes. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. I'd like to hear comments of what some areas of chapter 2 that have particularly inspired the devotees on the call.
Yes, Prabhu. Sometimes it takes a while for them to unmute.
Sure.
Just
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. This is Amrita Kelidasi.
Haribo.
Thank you so much for such a run through, I would say. I'm sure if you would have to take multiple sessions, we would get even so much more out of this chapter. It's so beautiful. One thing which really touched me, there are many, but just choosing one for the sake of time, where you mentioned Duryodhana and all of them were there in Krishna's presence. So it's not that Krishna is there, that's a benefit, but it's Arjuna's trust and faith in Krishna that actually he got the benefit, and that's his wealth.
Yeah.
That was really touching for me because we all, I can speak for myself. I've got this blessing of Krishna's presence through the devotees and the bhakti. But am I really putting that faith or trust? So it kind of, that churning was happening. So it's really inspiring. I would like to go further deep. If you want to just share something.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last part. I think you muted preemptively. Like, did you say you wanted some comment on that point?
Yes, Prabhu, if you can. Yeah.
So one of the things that I particularly have really appreciated in the Gita is analyzing, understanding the relationship between Arjuna and Krishna. So many times the exchange between Arjuna and Krishna brings out some key messages of trying to understand the relationship between a spiritual teacher and the student. So in the very beginning, what we see is that Arjuna had no problem with Krishna's chastising him. You see, that from the very beginning, Arjuna trusted Krishna. For those that might be spiritual teachers in modern life, you have to be really, really careful. You have to know that there's a relationship before you can offer words of chastisement. Like the way Krishna said, you're an impotent fool. Wow. Arjuna took it. Not only that, after he heard that, he said, now I'm a soul surrendered to you. Please help me. So Arjuna trusted two things. Arjuna trusted the well-wishing of Krishna, and Arjuna trusted the wisdom of Krishna. Sometimes we can trust the well-wishing of a person, but we may not be able to trust the wisdom of a person. Or we may be able to trust the wisdom of a person, we may not be able to trust the well-wishing of the person that actually care about me. So Arjuna had both these facets, both the competence and the character. Trust has these two facets to it, competence and character. And sometimes we may trust a competence, we may not be able to trust a character, or vice versa. Like we may trust someone who's a really good driver, but we don't really trust their character may not be very good. So, for example, when we go on a plane, we trust the competence of the pilot because, gosh, it's United Airlines, right? So must be a good pilot. But we don't know the character. Arjuna trusted both the competence of Krishna, the wisdom of Krishna, and he trusted the character, meaning the well-wishing and the kindness of Krishna. And we see this over and over again in the Gita, time and time again. I'm thinking of this beautiful character of Krishna comes out of how he doesn't judge Arjuna. When Arjuna tells him, Krishna explains the whole 6th chapter, he explains how you're supposed to control your mind, and that's really the 6th chapter. There's so much conversation between the two. And after all that explanation, in text 34, Arjuna tells Krishna, that's all fine and dandy that you explain all this, but I can't follow it. My mind can't do it. Chanchalami mana Krishna. So what we see how Krishna deals with him is very loving. He says, asamshayam mahabaho, that without a doubt, he validates Arjuna's feelings. This is a very, you should say, emotionally intelligent. Of course, Krishna is the supreme person, so he's extremely emotionally intelligent. He validates Arjuna's feelings. He says, you're absolutely right. Asamshayam mahabaho. Manodur nigraham chalam, because it's very hard to control the mind. But then Krishna gives him some reassurance, he gives him some encouragement, he gives him some help, take him one step further along the path. And he tells Arjuna, but it is possible through detachment and through practice. So we see, and there are many other examples, but we see these beautiful exchanges between Krishna and Arjuna that really speak to us and instruct us on the relationship between a spiritual teacher and a student. Does that help?
Yes, Prabhu, so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, I know it's, are we supposed to end now at 6:30?
No, Prabhu, it's okay. We can take more questions if you are okay with
I
that.
have time if devotees have more thoughts. I'd like to hear, more thoughts or more inspirations from chapter 2.
Let me check from YouTube. Anybody have anything there? I don't see anything. Any questions on YouTube and Zoom call, devotees? Any questions to Prabhu? Please unmute yourself. Okay. Prabhu, I have a question, if it is okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
So I was wondering, in this chapter, interestingly, maybe I did not see, maybe I missed it. Krishna doesn't use the word Atma, which generally we refer that as a individual soul. He says something all pervading the body, like that, but he doesn't directly uses the word in Sanskrit, Atma. Any thoughts on that, Prabhuji? I know Prabhupada translated that.
I just cheated and I just checked. He does. Check text 45.
Okay.
Traigunya Vishya Veda Nistraigunya Bhavajana Nirdvando Nitya Sattvasto Niryoga Kshema Atmavan. Be situated in the self.
Cool. Because he was talking about all those things before that. He doesn't refer that as Atma, but he starts with saying that pervading the entire body. He talks like that, and I think you're right. 45th, he is more Atmavan.
Yeah.
Thank you, Prabhu. That's interesting. Krishna is indirect a lot of times.
Yeah. And we see that in the chapter 2. Chapter 2 is very, very good chapter to introduce people to the Gita, because he doesn't go very strongly about the bhakti principle.
Right.
But in contrast, when we go to chapter 18, where the 78 verses are there, the longest chapter, as you head towards the end, Krishna is strong, where he says, surrender to me. And then he says it again, surrender to me. And he says, your relationship with me is the most, I mean, he's like strong. He just hints at it in chapter 2, in text 61, and that's it. It's beautiful how the Bhagavad Gita unfolds to emphasize some of the key messages.
It's also nice to hear from people like you, devotees. Very nice. Thank you, Prabhu. Anybody else wants to have any comments to Prabhu? Please unmute yourself.
Prabhuji, can you explain the importance of text 47, where Lord Krishna explains about performing duties? So what is the importance of this text?
I'd be happy to answer. I can go in different directions, but I'd like to know what's inspiring you to ask that question. Maybe then that way I'll be able to hit the mark better.
It's like he says, do your duty and don't expect any reward in turn. But most of us, we always try to do something or fulfill something thinking that we need to please the Lord.
If that is the motivation, then that is not considered to be the phala, the word phala that's used, ma phaleshu kadachana, that meaning you're looking for a result in your work. Krishna is speaking about material phala, meaning, sometimes people want recognition. I want people to appreciate me by my work, or I want money, I want a promotion, I want to be able to buy stuff, I may want social status, right? I might want my kids to succeed in whatever. And so all of these desires that are part of our duty is because we want some result. These are all material motivations. So when we say phala, the phala, or the motivation to see Krishna pleased, as you said, that is bhakti. That is not a material phala. That's a spiritual phala. In fact, Krishna would say, very good. If that is your motivation, I'm very happy.
Okay.
And Krishna in that case is not even interested in the result. He's just interested that we're endeavoring for that result, if that makes sense. Because whatever we do, we're not in control of the result anyway. Krishna is. Yes. We're in the service department, he's in the results department. So if our motivation to work and do our duty is for pleasing Krishna, whether it be cooking or cleaning or working or driving or shopping or what have you, if the motivation is to please Krishna, then that is not material phala. In fact, that is encouraged, very much encouraged, that we should want that result.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Prabhuji.
All right. You're welcome.
Prabhuji, one last question. I'm sorry, I'm jumping in the last moment.
No problem.
My name is Arjuna. I am introduced to this Gita and Art by Amrita Kili Mataji, so I'm very thankful to her. So
yeah, she's a good teacher.
So extending to the same, adding to the same text, people do good things, and over the period they will forget about those. But my grandma used to say, never say I did. When you say I did, the result of it will go away. So, but sometimes I feel like it is very important to remind these people that whatever they are today because of someone else did for them. I mean, people have a short memory. Once they pass through those difficult hurdles, they will forget about everything and they think, it's all because of me, I did. So how to handle that situation gracefully?
Is your question how to help others not be egotistical about such things?
Yeah.
And do it gracefully?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we see in chapter 3 how Arjuna is dealt with by Krishna. He's not so graceful because he doesn't need to be so graceful. He tells Arjuna, Prakriti kriyamanani gune karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. This word kartaham, thinking I am the doer, I did it, is your point. Krishna says such a person is vimudha. They're completely foolish. Mudha means foolish. Vimudha means completely foolish. So Krishna says in a very strong way that you're not the doer. So your question is, how can we help someone who is in that mindset, but it's a wrong mindset or it's an incorrect mindset to think themselves a doer, rather they are recipients of a lot of care and kindness from others, and therefore they're able to do whatever they're able to do today.
Exactly.
And a lot depends on the relationship we have with such a person. First would be to build a loving relationship like Krishna had with Arjuna, where there is trust. So this point, I don't know if you heard the exchange between Amrita Keli Mataji and myself, but we were talking about this point about trust and how important trust is to be able to hear and receive the message from somebody else. So if there isn't trust in our being a well-wisher, and there isn't trust in our being a person of wisdom, then when we try to speak something, it might backfire. In fact, they might reject you and want to go away and not talk to you again. So it's something to be very, very cautious of. It's a mistake I've made a number of times in my life, to speak when there isn't sufficient trust. So my recommendation would be, in general, a general principle would be to build trust where they trust us to be a person of wisdom, or they trust us to be a person, and they trust us to be a person of character and well-wishing. And in that sacred relationship, then one can share more openly. So it's a long journey to get there. Another thought is by giving them just acts of kindness, just by giving them opportunities to hear messages of Gita, maybe inviting them to a Gita discussion where these principles such as not being a doer are taught. Sometimes people, the Bhagavad Gita is spoken to Arjuna. Some say, why is Arjuna being spoken to? Arjuna is a pure devotee. He's already a friend of Krishna. He doesn't need to listen to this. That is true. But Krishna is arranged so that Arjuna listens to this so that we can listen to it. The example Prabhupada gives is like when a mother wants to teach a daughter-in-law, she instructs the daughter. So the daughter-in-law indirectly gets the message. So similarly, when we bring the person to listen to a class or something, we're indirectly helping them to get the message. It's a transcendental trickery.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. That helps.
Okay. All right. I think it might be a little late now. It's 6:45. Yes. Maybe we can end.
There are two devotees expressing their gratitude in the chat. I know you're not able to see, so I'm going to read for you. So Devi Murti Mataji is saying thank you for the nice class, and Mega Mataji is saying very beautiful class. So many great points you brought up. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Oh, thank you.
So there are two comments from the chat. So thank you very much, Prabhuji. We really appreciate your time. Iskcon Naperville is always looking forward to hear from you. our congregation are very eager to hear from your lectures. Very nice. Thank you for summarizing chapter 2. We are very grateful to you. Thank you, Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhu.
So next week we will be having a chapter 3 summary by one of our devotees. Hare Krishna. With that, we're going to conclude the call, and Hare Krishna, everybody. Srila Prabhupada ki jai ho.
Jai Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare